Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Busby, and I'm the Head of Events at the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm delighted to welcome you along to our webinar today. It's got a bit of a title. It's called Adapt or Die, and it's a quite dramatic title, so I'm looking forward to this one as well. I just quickly want to go over the rules that were just for the webinar. Can I ask, if you're not already, that you pop yourself on mute for the webinar if you're not speaking, that would be much appreciated. And we want to encourage a bit of interaction. So if you've got any questions, you can pop it into the chat box and we can come to it at the end, or you can raise your hand and Shona will call on you as well. But I'm delighted today to be working with Rocket Experience, who are a management consultancy focusing on growth and development for your business as well. And I want to introduce our presenter today, who is Shona Watson, who's a director of Rocket Experience. And she's joined today by Ben as well, so Ben McCorkindale as well from Rocket Experience too. And today is about managing change. And the Rocket Excellence Group have sort of said there's 4 founding needs in understanding and embracing change for your business, which is vision, clear objectives, communication, and motivated and, interestingly, motivating people as well. But I'm not going to blabber on too much. I'm going to hand you straight over to Shona to start the presentation today. So Shona, over to you.
Thank you very much. For those that don't know me or haven't read anything on the Chamber blog about me, I've been doing change management, the people side of it, for 20 years. And for me, this is a soft side of change, which is actually the hard side, because it's getting people on board, it's getting people working with culture, it's getting them to change the way you want to, and it's them who make the change happen. I know that's not terribly good English grammar, but your people make the change happen. Putting in a new IT system doesn't make the change happen. It doesn't bring you the benefits you want. Putting in new processes, merging companies, is always the people that are the common denominator to make the change happen. And for 20 years, I've been working with many organizations, both in the private and the public sector, both large and small, to make change happen. And the common denominator, whether it's a big public sector organisation like the prison service in England and Wales, or a small organisation, is getting the people on board and making the change happen smoothly and letting them lead the change. You've got to listen to your people to help them make the change. And I think that for me is one of the key things out of the good leadership part of change management. So Ben, my colleague, is joining us on the chat today, and he's going to tell you what he's done in change management.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for letting us come along today. I'm the Director of Marketing for the Rocket Group, and I'm working with Shona in Rocket Excellence and with our clients. And change is a big part of what we do, and everybody talks about it. So we thought we would just try maybe demystify some of the things that are used. We're not here to talk with babble and gobbledygook. We don't like that kind of management speak. We are trying to kind of get this into a little bit of context. I'm the one that came up with the title for today. Yes, it's enigmatic. Apologies for the clickbait, but there is a reason for it as well. Adapt or Die is about grabbing your attention, for sure. But we wanted to kind of focus in that the die part is pretty real, because we have to acknowledge as businesses that our businesses, our people, and what we're trying to achieve are constantly changing. Nobody likes change. Nobody likes change. Human beings are not built for change. It's not something that we do naturally, but we have to. There's 2 reasons why we have to. One, we have to change with the world around about us, which we all know. That's adaptation part, I suppose. But the other bit is, how do we stay relevant as organizations? And I think this is where the change bit gets to be really kind of problematic. I purposely use the word adapt because it's too close to adaptation. And what we tend to find in change management projects is the best of intentions start them. We've got a bold vision. We want to do something new. We want to grow into a new space. And yet somehow it gets eroded. And it doesn't matter how good your plan is. It doesn't matter how good the consultants are that you get in to do it. It gets modified. It gets mollycoddled as it goes along, because people don't like change and no one likes confrontation. And it becomes adaptation, and that's not change. we want to talk a little bit today about keeping a hold of that fire at the beginning of that process. That thing, either it's the start of a new project, a realization that you've got to do something new. You have to stay true to that bit. And we want to kind of discuss a little bit about how we think that's kind of best achieved. We're trying to do ourselves out of a job here, and we're going to be quite honest about that. You know, we are change consultants. Please hire us, because we're very good at what we do. But actually, if you listen to us, hopefully you'll realize that the power is within your organization already, and it's in your own hands. Because as Shona says, it's actually just about people. And this is more of an emotional journey than it is a practical one. Now, we can come along into your organization and we'll give you a fantastic, robust plan that'll take you from A to Z, not a problem at all. But it won't be what you're trying to do unless you think about this as an emotional experience, and you think about the people, and you think about how they feel when things change, and about how you communicate that in a way that they accept it. And also that you do the hard thing, which is that you force it to happen. Because sometimes it's just about taking a gamble. If you believe that something has to change, whether it be small or big, then you have to do it. And you have to be comfortable with what happens next. And it might not be perfect, and it might not be what you envisaged, but you have to do it. Otherwise, it's adaptation and it's not change, and you won't get the best out of it. Over to you, Shona.
Thank you. So the next part for me is about the external world at the moment is just forcing change on us left, right, and centre. And we've probably experienced more change that we weren't expecting in the last 2 years than we ever have in a long, long time. And when I started in change 20 years ago, one of the things that the consultants who came in to work with us said was, you need a burning platform. Well, we've had so many burning platforms lately. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've got COP26, we've got net zero. We've got working from home, we've got flexible working, we've got how do people transition into what works for the business and what works for them going forward. And for me, there's two key messages out of this. One is leadership. So what's your vision for your company for the next year, for the next 5 years? And how are you going to be able to change that when the circumstances change? I mean, nobody saw COVID coming and the impact that it's had on businesses, either in the hospitality industry, where it's sort of been decimated, and then it's got the growth factor because nobody can go abroad. So at home, we've done really well out of people staycationing now compared to what we had previously. So how do we market that and sell that and make our organizations great with fantastic customer service that people want to come back to? What are you doing to make that customer service happen? How are you looking after your people? As Richard Branson says, look after your people and they'll look after the customer. So it's, for me, there's a huge element of customer service there. I mean, how many of you have been stuck on phone calls, emailed, tried to get in touch with companies to get things fixed? You want to do something and you can get nowhere near customer service to help you, and COVID's taken the blame for it. If you're wanting to stand out just now, I think one of the things which can make you very different to everybody else is to give brilliant customer service. And like Alan, I'm a big Disney fan. I think customer service, you'll see the Mickey Mouse clock behind him. I think customer service is, we've lost that over 20 years. And I think this is a huge opportunity to put our customers back at the heart of what we're doing, and in vision and in business going forward. You know, we're losing the personal touch, I think, a lot of the time now with everybody buying online. And I think for the small markets and for Scotland, we've got a huge opportunity there to do something different and improve customer service. The second one is about leadership. The number of times I've worked in organizations where the board, or if it's a big organization, the management of a division have decided this is our vision and this is the way we're going forward. But the one thing they haven't done is consult with the people who are actually doing the job now to say, does that work for you? And to actually listen. I think one of the key skills which is missing in most organizations is listening to the people who do the job, listening to the people on the ground. And for me, having focus groups and working with your team to find out what they think can fix things and what needs fixed, rather than what your view from the helicopter is two totally different things. And so a key message for me out of today is listen to your people, ask them about flexible working, ask them what the future is for working from home versus being in the office, what works for the business versus what works for you, for the individual. And it will be different for everyone. And how do you adapt your HR practices going forward that the people in the office who may be there for presenteeism aren't given opportunities that the people who are working from home aren't? How do you keep discrimination out of the picture there in the future? And the second one is leadership isn't always about the people at the top. Some of the best leaders I've found are in middle management or are on the shop floor, because again, they listen to people and they manage to get things done and make things happen, either through the system or round about the system if the bureaucracy is too strong. And I think a key message out of this is, who are your leaders for the future who are not, you see big organizations go, no, the top 100 leaders are going to a conference, but they miss out on so much because they don't include the people who are actual leaders, who are ignored because they haven't got the grade. But they're actually the ones that are making your business work. They're actually the ones that are motivating people. They're the ones who are making the change happen. And I think it's very important going forward that, especially if these people aren't in the office for whatever reason, or the factory floor or shop floor, that these people don't get ignored, because they're your future, they're your business, they're the ones that are making it profitable, and they're the ones that can carry you into the next stage of your business's journey.
You'll note that we don't have any PowerPoint here. It's a very deliberate act. It's another kind of symbol or mark that what we're talking about is a people thing. So we wanted to just be here uncluttered by bits and pieces to look at. Also, the comments are open and you can ask us questions as we go, and we would be delighted if you did. Because again, just like in your own organization, it's about showing up and having one-to-one relationships and one-to-many relationships, and not allowing systems and processes to dictate the change in itself. So change management organizations like ours will give you those frameworks, and this is why I'm kind of stressing this point, that those are fine, and they're like the kind of guardrails for any kind of project, but they won't make it happen. It's the strength or otherwise of the relationships with people, because at some point you'll have to have difficult conversations, and you will have to try to explain difficult ideas and things that people are uncomfortable about, and then sometimes that won't pan out well. I wanted to talk a little bit about our own example, because we are not perfect, and as an organization we are going through change. So Shona talked a little bit about the environment that we're all in, the COVID environment and the Brexit environment being two really good drivers right now. Our organization, up until 2 years ago, although it had always been a creative agency at its core, had become an exhibition-focused company. And those of you who might know of Rocket might only know us as exhibition, design and build manufacturer company. And actually, us being here talking about this might seem a little bit strange. That was because the company had become really successful at doing one thing, and that was great. But our managing director, John Sterling, he already had concerns about having all of his eggs in one basket. And I joined the company. He and I had worked together. I'd been a client of his for many years. I joined because he wanted to start to rebalance the company. So he saw and instinctively knew quite early on that he needed to change things, and that his existing team weren't going to be able to do that. He needed new ideas to come into the company, which was great. What he didn't have was a plan, but what he did have was a vision. And he wanted to get the company to be focused in on creativity and design first and foremost, and then build functions back out from that. So yes, exhibitions, design and build will continue, but he wanted to do marketing projects. He wanted to find other things that had that same idea, which is why Shona is working with us, because although Shona is a management change consultant, kind of a thought leader in that space, every project that she's ever worked on has come from ideas, and she's perfect to join us and let us do things in different spaces. Now, was that accepted in the company? Not really. No, it was not. Those who had been busting their gut, doing a brilliant job, thought that this was nonsense, frankly, because it had become what they wanted to do, which was it had become an exhibition company. That's what they were working on, and that's what they knew how to do. And this change seemed like a distraction. And to be honest, it was COVID that forced the issue, because exhibitions stopped and events stopped, and we didn't have a choice anymore. We had to find a way of surviving as a company. We had to start properly investing in new ideas and new things that we could do. So that extraneous force was something that we harnessed rather than something that we ran from. We didn't panic at that point. We actually leant into it and embraced it. And we would recommend that all companies think about how that might happen, because sometimes the most adverse situations are the trigger point for something very, very positive to come. So what we did was we put it to the company, really in a very, very start way, which is, this is the direction that we're going, and we want to build this out and build the planning around that. And I'll talk about that in a wee second. Who's in? Not everybody was in. And so we had to have some difficult conversations, and we had to let some people go because they didn't see that there was a natural home for them anymore. Those are tough conversations. They didn't happen all at once. They didn't happen overnight. It was over time, I would say, really became clear. But at every level of the company, including directors, people could not see themselves, did not understand what was happening, and didn't feel like they could fit. And at some point, we had to do everything we could to try and explain to them where they were in that. And then at some point, we had to say, okay, well, then that's a decision made, because we can't make you fit into this if you don't feel comfortable. And those are the difficult conversations I was talking about before. And I think they are needed. Now, we might be wrong, and they might be right, and maybe they'll laugh their ass off at us if we fail, and that's fine. That's their prerogative, and we'll take that one on the chin. But this is about splitting change management into real change, and sometimes downplaying the management part, because management sometimes creeps in, and that's about keeping everybody sort of happy. But that's not real change. If you fundamentally believe something has to happen, you have to have those difficult conversations, and you have to be prepared to say goodbye, and you have to be prepared to fail. Now, we're prepared to fail, and that's the kind of organization that I want to work in. And I have found that the people that we're attracting to join us now are equally motivated by that energy. And so actually we're turning that into a positive. Hopefully, and Shona can say if that's true or not, one of the attractive things about joining us was just that. It's not risky at all costs, but it's risk with a purpose. That's an attractive thing for people that want to work with. That's a good motivator. And existing people and new people can be motivated to work for an organization like that. And we have definitely attracted some really, really powerful and passionate people as a result. And that can only be good for us. And that gives me the confidence that we're going in the right direction. On a practical level, just to kind of quickly talk about that, this is not all hypothetical. As a company, we have a big factory, which is not doing as much as it used to do. And what we didn't have was a lot of the systems and processes that you need to run a company that does a number of different things. Didn't have a common finance system. We had an old-fashioned kind of process. We didn't have an IT infrastructure. We didn't have good communications. The company was used to working out of a factory and office. Even with the lockdown and COVID, as many of us had to deal with, it didn't have the technology for people to work in different locations. So I kind of took that upon myself to start building some of that infrastructure right, but I couldn't do it alone. So I started to work with the team who were with us, and to find out who had sort of passion and interest in this place. And actually, there was a guy who's our director of creativity, but he had become the de facto IT guy in the company. He had an interest in it. He wouldn't say that he was an expert in it, but he was the guy that people went to and said, Scott, can you fix this? Scott, how does that work? Scott, why is that not doing it what it's supposed to do? And so he was very, very motivated with the idea about putting in infrastructure. And by that, I mean, we brought SharePoint in, we bought cloud backup servers as opposed to an old rickety hard drive sitting in the office. We brought Microsoft Teams in. We've now brought Xero, the finance system. He became a leader in that because he had a passion for it. And he shared my vision on that. And so between us, we were able to start to impact and influence some of the people around about us, particularly those who are a bit kind of techie averse, unhappy, to use that term. Everybody needs a little bit of encouragement for change, and the things that you know how to do that maybe work for you but don't work for other people, to let go of that is it's almost like a death in the family. If you've got your thing, your form, your thing that works, why would you let that go at the risk of getting into something that you don't understand and that you can't be sure is in your control? But the more people that I could get in the company who were with that way of thinking, the more impact and influence we could get with those who were concerned. And that's another big part of change. It's that personal level of assurance, reassurance, continued reassurance, demonstrating success. What we did was we had not only that infrastructure, but we started to bring in workshops on the kit, and we had Q&A sessions on the technology, and we had trial sessions, and we did all sorts of bits and pieces. And we never said to anybody, you're wrong for asking a question. And we never said to anybody, you're wrong to think that this is a bad idea. We said, you're right to have concerns. What are they? Let's see if we can work out a way of making that work for you. And little by little, bit by bit, we have brought in SharePoint. We can work remotely. We do have a finance system. These things are beginning to embed, but also the processes around about them. So gone are the days of paper copies of things, and gone are the days of manual handling of bits of paper and spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. Now we're doing proper workflows. We're doing things in systems. We're sharing information not as attachments in emails. We're sending links around the company, stuff that was unheard of 2 years ago. And people are much more comfortable with it. It does work. It does happen. But you have to be prepared to put in that time and effort and let people be worried. And also be prepared to tell them you just don't have a choice at this moment in time if you believe it's the right thing to do. And we're doing all right. I mean, we're here today. We're talking to you guys. The company is going from strength to strength. Yes, the exhibition side is kind of coming back to life, but we're working in marketing. We're working in consultancy. We now have a conference which we would not have dreamt of having 6 months ago, called Net Zero Scotland, little plug, which is an environmental conference in Edinburgh next year. We're doing things now that will be unimaginable. And a lot of that comes from inspiring people to think beyond what they're used to and leaning into what they don't know but want to try. So it does work. And we are not just cobbler's wains. We do this stuff on ourselves as well.
I talked about people before and leadership, and I thought I'd give you a couple of examples from my work in life before I joined Rocket to highlight how important communication and leadership is. One of the big projects that I worked on was a prison service in England and Wales. They were putting in a new HR system, procurement and finance. The finance and procurement parts were done. They were working on the HR part of it. Well, HR had always been done in the jails, and the HR people looked after the pay slips, and the HR people looked after absence and everything else. And that was all going to be moving to a shared service centre. And so it had to become one way of doing things rather than 128 ways of doing things, where everybody in the jails did everything their own way, and they had to come up with one consistent way. And this was back in the days before Teams and SharePoint and everything else. It was still a lot of paper forms. They were still being sent to the shared service centre in Wales, or they were being emailed. And I'm sure things have moved on a long time since I moved down there. But once the main part of the HR system had been put in, one of the two problem children left. One was the recruitment of prison officers. When we mapped out the process for that, it took 9 months to get a prison officer on board. So they knew that they had to rationalise that process and make it shorter and make it slicker. because there was a shortage of prison officers. And the second one was vetting for not directly employed workers. There's 50,000 people going to jails in England and Wales each year who aren't staff. So you've got everybody from hairdressers, nurses, doctors, chaplains, lighting engineers, you name it, security, they all go into the jails, and different jails have different security levels. And some people, you had a chaplain going into 3 jails, he got vetted 3 times. You got other people who it was, oh, well, we've vetted him once in the region, so that's okay for everybody, and we'll just share that information without really doing the checks properly. So putting in this project there'd been 2 pilots before I came on board, and both of them had failed. I ran a 3rd pilot and it failed. And we started with the smallest region and worked with them really closely to work out what would work for them and what would work for the Shared Service Centre, and what would satisfy the civil servants who decreed the policy in London, because it was a long way from the civil servants sitting in the ivory tower in London compared to out in the jails and how people worked. And we came across loads of problems as people saw it. And like Ben said, it was sitting listening to their problems and working with them to come up with solutions at all levels of the organisation, from the person who filled in the vetting forms to the security manager to the governor. I mean, one of our big selling points as a message at that time was Baroness Scotland had just got fined £10,000 for not having the right paperwork on right to work in the UK for a cleaner. And so we were able to say, if you don't get the paperwork right, you could be the next one with the headlines in the Daily Mail of fined for not having the right paperwork in place. So it was great having these kind of examples, but it was also listening to the people on the ground. I mean, one jail said to us, we don't know who comes in here. We said, don't be ridiculous. You've got a huge security office. You've got a huge ledger where you write down who comes in. Yeah, but we don't know how often they come in or how often they need vetted. And the departments don't tell us who's coming in when. So I know it sounds so basic, but it brought us so much goodwill. Was we put together 2 spreadsheets. One was a form that the different departments had to fill in and send to the gate to say, this is who's coming in this week or next week. And the second one was a simple spreadsheet which said, this is the people who are visiting from all these different departments, and you can keep track of the dates of when they come in, and 3 times in they're out. If they don't get vetted before the 4th time they come in, they don't get to come in as a visitor. And although that wasn't part of our project, it brought us a huge amount of goodwill, because that form got shared with all jails and everybody went, oh, we haven't got anything like this. But it was listening to the business and listening to their needs that let us work out what was needed. And that wasn't a governor or a deputy governor or the so-called real leaders of the organisation. That was a member of staff who was on the gate, a normal prison officer who said, this isn't working for us, can you help us fix it? And because we fixed it for one jail, it fixed it for all jails, which made a really big difference to the project that we were rolling out, because people then started speaking to us more and saying, can you fix this as well? Or how do we get around that problem? On another project where I was working, it was a merger of 7 limited companies into one functional way of operating as a group. And we'd laid out the timescale, we'd laid out the plan for the change. There was a lot of fear in the organisation because it was a restructure. People were having to apply for their jobs. People were having to go through assessment centres. But again, it was the little things that made a difference. At one of the open sessions we had, where people were saying, when we were talking to them about the assessment centres, they said, how are we going to get the results of the assessment centres? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, your manager's going to sit you down in a room and he's going to tell you what your results are and tell you what your training plan's going to be out of that, or what your future is going to be, what you have to do to either make the grade, or what your options are for looking for other roles within the organisation. And they said, oh, that sounds great, because last time someone just put a piece of paper up in the kitchen with everybody's results on it and who'd passed and failed. And I thought, it's not hard to make a difference when that's the type of situation that people were in. And you thought, if that person had been going through an assessment centre, is that's how you would have liked to have get your results? And for me, it's treating people the way that you would like to be treated. You want to be listened to, you want to be valued. And especially, I think, in the current climate of working from home, how do you listen to and value your employees going forward?
I thought it might be useful as well to share a failure, because I think I've learned more from failure than anything else, and hopefully you've all not failed as often as I have, but I hope you've all learned something from when things didn't quite pan out. Maybe failure's a bit strong. And also go back to that sense of adapt or die. Well, this was a moment when I was working for Zero Waste Scotland and was required to lead a particularly big change project. And it was an adapt or die moment. And to be fair, it was death. And let me explain why I think that happened. For those who might not know what Zero Waste Scotland is, it's an organisation that is publicly funded. It's not a public organisation in itself. It's not even a quango. It sits in a very, very strange place in the public sector landscape of Scotland. But its sole aim is to move resources from central government into climate action and mitigation. So its biggest arms are for businesses. It used to be called Resource Efficient Scotland, and these were more practical energy, water and waste saving technologies and funding and ideas for businesses so that they could lower their bills, and that would be beneficial for the environment. And investment in what's called the circular economy. Circular Glasgow obviously is kind of actually come from that, where what you're trying to do as a business or an area or a country is divert as much from landfill as possible by repurposing materials. Make sure if you're going to manufacture something, it's got as long a lifespan as possible, that it can be repairable, that as few bits go to landfill, and that you can keep that thing going as long as possible. Like what in the old days we used to do before we got all about chucking things in the bin. The organisation has been publicly funded, and the opportunity for ERDF, European Regional Development Funding, came about. And the organisation had, without really telling anybody, bid for money. This would be about 2013 for the 2014-2022 programme, and had been successful, bizarrely. Shouldn't have been. Wasn't a big enough organisation for it, but had bizarrely been accepted to receive £74 million of funding, match funding, which would be a massive shot in the arm for all of the projects that were being undertaken by the organisation. And that was, tremendous. But it was done in isolation, and that was where it kind of faltered at first. And I wasn't involved in that bit. So the project has seen the opportunity and jumped at it, which many organisations do, mine included. But it hadn't really thought through what the impact of that would be. It was massive opportunity, but it was massive change. If anyone's ever been involved in a European funded project, the attention to detail in bookkeeping and record keeping is massive. You do need to demonstrate with absolute accuracy that your money is being used correctly and within the rules that you've signed up for, and those rules are many. But it's a great way of getting additional funding to boost projects. And we had put in a bid based on what we could do, but because there hadn't been engagement with the organisation overall, those people who were delivering those projects already had absolutely no idea of what was going to be asked of them until it had already been accepted and we were already starting. Two things that we'd failed on right from the bat. One, failure to communicate. Two, we lied effectively. I'm going to use that word. Tell them if you like, because I'm sure they'll admit it. They lied about the capacity that the organisation had. And I think only actors can get away with telling directors that they know how to ride a horse and they'll figure out how to do it later. Really don't think organisations should ever do it. And that was a big learning for me right at the beginning. Be bold, be ambitious. Don't overpromise unless you know how you're going to deliver. And we did that. So what we were trying to do at that point was to change an organisation while it was already in flight. And that really is about sticking the wings on a Boeing 747 when it's over the Atlantic. Not a good idea. And I was trying to do two things. One was to bring people with, who were already doing these projects, and to tell them what you're doing is brilliant, but now you need to do these 70 additional things to justify and get funding to do it. That was a problem. And also build the infrastructure that was going to allow us to successfully claim the money from Europe, which is also a big problem. Yes, we had a change management plan. Yes, we had written down our steps. Yes, we were thinking about communication. The next feeling was it was all broadcast. And I think this happens too often as well. Me and the rest of us that were responsible were broadcasting to people what they had to do. We weren't listening. We were not listening because we were panicking, I think. But we were telling people how wonderful this opportunity was and that this was what they were going to have to do. And what they were saying and we were ignoring was, I'm here to do a project already. I'm doing that project successfully. I'm not going to stop doing it the way that I do it because it is already delivering. And we could not get people to change what they were doing. The kind of work that we needed them to do, the justification bit, was so labor intensive, it was beginning to divert them from the actual delivery bit. And so they just stopped. They just stopped doing it. That was a big problem. And there was no way back. There was no way back because there was no argument to that, because they were delivering and those projects were successful and they were doing exactly what they'd been asked to do. This other thing, this change had been forced upon them and it seemed completely unnecessary. And no amount of throwing £74 million in people's faces was going to tell them otherwise, because they were not motivated by the amount of funding that was there. They were told what they had to do. Very, very important for the planet, very, very important for their clients. That was all that mattered. And they weren't going to deviate from that path. On an internal basis, we also couldn't get the systems wrestled around to work. Again, from an internal change management perspective, people in finance, people in HR, people in procurement, they were doing what they were supposed to do. They were following all the regulations. They were not motivated to add burden on top of that because it wasn't worthwhile. We were broadcasting to them that this was needed. We had to do this. We had to do this, but there was no incentive. There was no benefit to them. All there was hassle. And we failed to try and explain any benefits to that. What would we have done different? Well, we should have collaborated before the bid went in. It should have been a more of a collective approach. We should have properly risk assessed the opportunity against the status quo. There was a moment where we maybe should have passed because it was too big to chew. All of those things in hindsight are fantastic. But it taught me most of all that change, the germ of change, can be very intoxicating, I think, sometimes. And it is very difficult to keep perspective on the value of it. And perhaps if I am selling our services at all, it is at that moment in time before anything else. Before you get to a plan, before you get to a communication strategy, before you start to map out the steps, it is really getting a serious view of whether that change is worthwhile and whether the consequences of it are valuable. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, I think that sometimes the fear that can creep in at that moment can be assuaged by some of the external factors. So if your back is up against the wall, if you really do need to make a change in some way, that can kind of see you through. But I don't think that should ever be at the risk of not really stating at what you're trying to achieve and really asking others to comment on whether that is a worthwhile change. Because in this case, it wasn't. And did we adapt? No. And did the project die? Yes, it did. And that money has not been claimed. I probably shouldn't tell that story because I'm probably under some sort of confidentiality. Oh, well, I think it's an important lesson to kind of share. Tell your friends. Don't tell them I told you. Nothing was wasted, at least. That is good. And those funds found good home elsewhere. But it's a shame. It's a shame that it wasn't able to be used better and that people didn't feel that they were being empowered. And it probably actually did a bit of harm organisationally as well. I certainly know I felt quite scarred after that. And it is difficult to motivate people once change has been kind of thrown in your direction like a grenade and then it never quite panned out. I don't know if there is a recovery in many ways. Well, I'm not with the organisation anymore, so maybe that's an answer. I'm not quite sure. But I think it is worth bearing in mind. Context is key. Context is definitely key, and ask those searching questions. And as I said before, bringing people like us who are dispassionate at that moment to ask those questions before anything else is done. Because if you don't, and you can't then properly bring people with you, then it is almost as if you're pushing water uphill. And then you get into the mitigation, and then you get into the adaptation, and then what you get at the end is frustrating for everybody. Because although our boss often says the best deal is where everybody walks away not quite getting what they want, I think when it comes to real effective change, that doesn't work. That's not a recipe for success. That's business as usual.
I've never heard you tell him that.
Sorry?
I've never heard you tell him that.
Have you not? Oh, I do.
No.
I do it quietly when you're not there.
We've got a question from Jimmy. Jimmy, do you want to join us? Can you unmute?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. You can see from my background, I'm involved with Rotary.
Mm-hmm.
And Rotary is a community service volunteer organisation. We actually pay a subscription to be involved. But the reason that we pay a subscription to volunteer is that pays for the international, national and local infrastructure. It covers expenses and things like that. It also covers a lot of administration and support and development, and it also covers insurance whenever we're doing particular projects. So if it's a Rotary-based project. So that's the justification for being involved. But it started off as a networking organisation where local people met together, shared responsibilities, passed on, I suppose a wee bit like BNI, passed on referrals and things like that. But then they decided, let's leave a legacy within the community, showing the fact that we've been here and we've done good in the community. And that's really been the main thrust of Rotary. Now, my problem about screaming to adapt or die was highlighted, obviously, as you mentioned, Ben, with COVID. We were very, very fortunate that Zoom was there. Many, many people adapted and joined Zoom. But Rotary, the average age in the UK is about 75. In my club, I've been fortunate in that we've managed to get a lot of young entrepreneurs involved. The average age is about 44, 45. Some as young as 29, then you've got old folk like me at 70 something. Now, my problem is I'm responsible for growing membership. And when the young folk look at people like me, all they see is these grey-haired old fellas, not realising that Rotary is full of people like you, young, dynamic individuals. And you mentioned, both of you, Ben and Shona, and I'm coming to the question, you mentioned about the skill sets that people have. We are an absolute, we are awash with amazing skills. We never gather that information. If we try to gather that information, people don't want to tell you. Because what they've got is they've got these phenomenal skills that we cannot use because we don't know about them. Yet they're the very skills that they use when they do a community needs project, or an individual needs project, or a disaster response project, or a disaster recovery project. That's what they fund. They raise money, they get involved, they assess, they do everything, but they don't realise that they're using their skills. And my numbers are dropping like a stone, simply because COVID's killing them off. And I mean literally, because they're all old. How do I let young folk know that Rotary covers anybody from 18 plus and their skills are essential and they're involved in a global network in over 200 countries, that they can communicate with people, as I said, around the world, and still, say, I'm developing this. Do you want to be involved? In other words, gain access, to that global network. I'm going to say it's free of charge, but it isn't. It's roughly 120 to 140 pound a year, but which is less than a cup of coffee a day. How do I? And that's where I'm saying I've got a situation that's screaming adapt or die. I need to raise my numbers from 950 up to a minimum of 1150 for our district to survive, or our district in the west of Scotland from Stranraer up to Fort William is going to disappear. It's just going to be subsumed into another district. And if there's a cost associated with it, I don't have the funds. That's the kicker.
Always. Shona, do you want to kick off on that one?
Still thinking, but my brain's going at 100 miles an hour just now as I'm starting thinking about what you've raised, Jimmy.
Well, my brain was like 100 miles an hour while you guys were talking. I'm going, oh wow, that's phenomenal. This is great. Tell me more. Oh, wait a minute. Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Couple of things. Well, maybe while you're thinking, Shona, couple of examples that might be kind of useful. I was working with Glasgow's Golden Generation. Don't know if you're aware of them. Just a year ago, and we did the rebranding for them. But the other thing that they were dealing with and are still dealing with was a wee bit like you. The kind of COVID situation was having two major impacts. One, unfortunately, was the user base, the people who could use the service were, as you say, dying off, but were also being isolated in their homes because they weren't able to mix in the centres. And the other one was that they didn't have the kind of the depth of organisation to do as much outreach as they wanted. They had been really successful at mobilising the resources they had to start going out with technologies and face-to-face to people's homes. But they do want to kind of grow that, and like you, Jimmy, the resources are slim and diminishing. They haven't been able to fundraise in quite the same way for the last 18 months because they can't get out and do that. So one of the things that we worked on together was the need to be bigger than they are, and to do that we created a partnership strategy. And this is maybe something you already have, but it's something that's worth looking at in the first instance. That for them was about them collecting what they needed to do, what they wanted to do, and what they could already do, and then to match that against other organizations who kind of fitted a little bit like a key in a lock. So who did things that they couldn't do but would be able to work together, who did things the same as Glasgow's Golden Generation that they could do projects together that make them bigger, and what was it going to take to get those kind of conversations going. And essentially, it was like a kind of gap analysis that we put into the strategy so that we could be very, very clear. What have you got? What do you need? And who can do it? And list those organisations as a kind of a guess, but including that networks and Glasgow Chamber of Commerce or one of those. Now, I haven't caught up with them to find out how things are going, but that was giving them the tools to start to reach beyond themselves in the first instance, to sort of think outside and to talk to other people, to help them find more volunteers, to help them find more people to work with, to help them find more sources of funding. But it was that kind of collection thing. And when you were talking, Jimmy, what was in my mind was that kind of first thing that we encourage people to do, which is exactly what you've tried and it's not working, which is, let's get a wee list together of who's got what skills. But you're right, nobody ever wants to fill it in because it feels a bit awkward for people, and also they're not quite sure how to do it. But if you flip it around, I think, and say, this is what we need. Can anyone do these things? Is anyone skilled in these things? People tend to, I think, take a step forward when they feel like there's a clear gap to walk into. So if you've got the resources, then if not, maybe we can help. Maybe it's turning that problem the other way around. Does that make sense, or is that something you've already tried?
No, but I'll tell you, that idea of just, a tick box, this is what we're needing a skill in. What a phenomenal, simple task. And thanks for mentioning it. I've seen it before, and I never even thought of transposing it in. And the sad thing is, although we're supporting organisations like Marie Curie, the Prince and Princess of Wales Hospice, And I've got to be honest, Alan Busby's been an absolute soldier for me, because any time I've tried to get information out there, you know, he's said, yeah, let me know and we'll put it into the membership bulletin. You know, so that's the reason I'm a Glasgow Chamber person, because of what I do. But most organisations come to us for funding. But what we don't have is, we don't have, you know, a ready-made fund in our pocket. We garner people and we arrange a fundraising event. It might be a golf event, it might be a dinner dance, it might be a race night, depending whether it's local, national or international. So, you know, we tap into our networks to sell the tickets, to get people to come along, you know. So it's changing their mindset, you know, the recipient's mindset, because they look to Rotary as being a funder. But we are a funder, but it's a funder in that will help you raise funds by getting together and organising an event. So I suppose getting that message out to, you know, the young folk. But people probably don't know that Rotary is one of the largest funding organisations for education in the globe. If you want to do a degree abroad, providing you meet some of the areas of focus, then you'll get 100% support from Rotary.
It's often the thing that we all do is make an assumption that people know what we're looking for, and sometimes it's just that sense check of checking, did we ask? And you'd be amazed sometimes that I've done it so many times and going, oh, I never asked you actually whether you wanted to do that, or you knew we did that, or whatever. And it can be a really good place to start in that kind of reach out. And people often are so good, especially if, as you say, Jimmy, that, you know, people know you as an organisation for helping them. They're probably desperate to reciprocate in some way, they just don't know how. And building that wee bridge out to them can be enough. And that can be with your younger people as well. The one thing that everyone always says is, I've not got enough time. But funny, people do make time for things that they feel like they can be effective in. And that can come from what you might do next there. Because if you're saying, I need and they go, I can do that, people, I think, will often find the time because they feel like, I can actually deliver that. I'm not going to be out of my comfort zone. I'm going to do something meaningful. Hopefully.
That's phenomenal. Thank you.
I don't think
Then
I
you
can
got any better ideas?
I've got two things, and I don't know how they'll work with Rotary, so forgive my ignorance on this one. And one is, you mentioned numbers that you wanted to go from 950. So I rounded that up to 1,000 and thought, you need 200 people in your organisation, which is less than a quarter, to refer and bring one more person into the organisation. So rather than thinking of it as a big problem, I've got to get from here to here, if you think of it as less than 25% of your people have got to bring one more person in, and you've got your organisation where you want it to be, and you could have more of it that way. And the other thing, I don't know, it was a thing I saw on Facebook, and I don't know if it'd work here or not. And it was where, instead of going to a library to hire a book, I think it's in Sweden, it's one of the Scandinavian countries, it's a people library, and you loan out an old person to a young person for them to share experiences and share knowledge and get them involved in things that they wouldn't normally get involved in. So I take no credit for this one. I read it on Facebook, but I thought, what a wonderful idea. And listening to you talk about Rotary, if you could get your older members in an area to start talking to younger people, be it even school kids or university kids or whoever, that they could start getting into the Rotary younger and change your age profile, that might help enormously. So it might be, you know, you get somebody to bring a grandchild, a nephew, a niece, and a young neighbour to one of your meetings or to a virtual meeting, and get them involved that way.
Yep, well, that's part of the mentoring within Rotary. But the sad part is, a young person, let's just say like Fiona, Nicola, yourself, Michael, or Ben, turning up, and Darlene, turning up and seeing, a load of old farts like me, grey haired. But the other thing is, it's not just men, it's women. No disrespect, I should have added in Morag as well, young lass like Morag. But it's when they see it, they say, I don't want to be involved with all these old, all these old folk. They've got this mindset and to try to break that down. Internationally, we've got, you know, the international president this year is saying each one bring one. You know, as you were saying, my problem is my network. Now, the great thing is because I'm involved with young entrepreneurs, my network is young entrepreneurs. So I can try and talk them into coming along. But most of the older folk in Rotary, their network are all PDGs, past, dead and gone.
I just don't lose sight of the branding opportunity. That might sound a bit weird, but you say old folk. I don't see you as an old person. I see you as an experienced person. But remember to tell people that. And if you're going to have this kind of moment of in a room where older people are there to talk to younger people, well then don't define it that way, and they won't think of it that way. Say we've got some experience we want to share. Again, it's just leaning across to the other side and thinking what people might want to receive rather than what you think you're broadcasting. I think you're probably maybe feeling older than you actually are there, Jimmy. So I think don't let that get in the way, because if we go down the adapt or die thing again, when experience is gone, you can't get it back. You know, when it's lost, you can't get it back. And I think it's important to keep shouting about it. Now, whether people, you know, sometimes they don't want to hear it, and maybe some people close their ears, and that goes back to change management as well. Well, you know, I've not met anyone that's got all the answers yet. And the ones that say they do, yeah, okay, good luck to you. I think most people, if you position it correctly and you reach out in that way and say, I'm looking for this kind of help in X, and also this is what I can share with you as Y, it's a transaction that way. I think grey hair is irrelevant. It's much more about learning from each other, and I think most people do. I mean, that's why we're all here today. I mean, we're here to learn from you all as much as hopefully you might get a wee nugget from us. So it goes back to that people thing, and that takes us back to don't rely on processes and don't rely on management speak. Be honest with them, Jimmy, and tell them what you need and tell them what you can give, and I reckon that maybe that'll help.
Just been looking at everything that's been in chat. Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you very much, everybody. You know, Nicola and Fiona, I like that. And thank you for allowing me to hijack the meeting. That wasn't my intention. And just in case you're wondering, I normally wear a red top and a red hat.
I knew I'd seen you somewhere before.
I think you were in the film. What was it?
Miracle on
34th Street. Yeah.
No, I'm just growing it in for the, you know, for the season.
For the season.
They'll come off on Boxing Day. But I look younger without it, honest.
But at the end of the day, Jimmy, people do business with people, not with organizations, and it's your personality that makes the difference.
Yes.
For you and for other people. And I never describe myself as older, although you describe me as young. Thank you. I'm like a good wine. Women mature like good wines. They don't age.
I don't know any women above the age of 39.
Well, you know, Shona, she's young as well. So you've got a new person to add to your young people's mix here.
Great, thanks, Ben. I'm older than you.
You're only as old as you feel.
True.
Does anyone else have any other questions, or have we bored you to tears?
Just everybody away, I'm sorry.
Oh, Alan.
I think I have one question, and jumping back to a wee bit of what you're saying is it's about the journey of taking people with you. It's like I quite often come up with great ideas and think that's what I want to do. But I sometimes in my own worst barrier is because I personally don't like change, and so I come up with all these ideas and then I quickly somehow, as you were saying, Ben, with the greatest intention, seem to just go back to the norm in the way that I always operate as well. And it's how I almost overcome my own barrier to some extent. Is that, you know, is there tools or ways that I can learn to try and push myself a little bit further there? Because I just sometimes think that I am the barrier to change, because I'll quickly revert back to the way it always goes. I don't know if I've asked that very well.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think for me, this it's a bit like going to the gym and getting into the discipline of doing something different, or God forbid, going on a diet or changing your eating habits. It's 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, can you stay in your change space and say, what can I do that's going to make myself do things differently today, or implement that idea? Or one of our tasks in Rocket is like, no matter what we do, be it training, consultancy, creativity, marketing, is like, what can we do just for sales and make the business grow? And my view on that is that, I'm too busy to do that bit of the business because that's the bit I don't like. So it's like, how can we dedicate time each day to that bit of the business we don't like? So how can you dedicate, Alan, how can you dedicate time each day to the change that you don't want to make? Or that you think you might like to make, but it might be a bit hard?
I just think I sometimes think that life just takes over sometimes, and it's how I discipline myself to some extent. Like, for example, we've come out of a really successful COP for the Chamber and delivered amazing events, and I came out with all these ideas of how I want to do things differently, and I can almost feel myself losing a wee bit of that excitement to going back to the norm.
So it's like, have you got that list of what you want to do differently, and sort of pick a topic, give it to a team member, share with somebody, we're going to hold each other accountable for this, and make the change happen and do things differently?
I just
and make time for that each day, rather diarize it as well, so that life doesn't take over and your meetings don't take over and the next great thing doesn't take over, that you actually build on what you've already done.
And be ruthlessly honest with yourself as well. Because try to give yourself some perspective, I reckon. Think about it as if you were trying to sell this idea to somebody else, could you do it? Because if you're not sold on it, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe that's what's holding you back. Maybe it's not so much, it's not maybe your motivation, maybe it's the idea itself. But if you ask yourself that question, you go, no, I don't think it's a good idea, then try and sell it to somebody else. Ask Michael. Sell it to Michael, because if you get a good response, then you've got nowhere to hide, because now it sounds like a thing you've definitely got to do. I do that with Shona all the time. I've got this idea, but I'm not sure. And then if her face falls, it's like, okay, it's going back in the box. If Shona gets excited, then okay, I'm going to do it now.
Oh no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. No, it's just I just sometimes worry that I am sometimes my own barrier. So it's just, it always weighs on my mind a little bit. Sometimes that.
And I think we all are our own barrier to change, because it goes back to, it's different, it's unknown, we don't know what's going to be the outcome, and we're better staying where we are, really, because we're in our nice little safe box in our safe house.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm quite conscious of time, that we've sort of overran quite a bit here as well. So I'm just conscious to maybe just bring it to an end, if that's all right. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us. If you do have questions that we never got to today, please email them in to myself, and we'll put my email address in the chat just now, and I'll share it with Shona and Ben. But what we'll also do following this, if Shona and Ben are okay with that, is we will share their contact details with you all, so that you can get in touch with them directly if you wanted to as well, and conversations further. Can I just say a huge thank you to Shona and Ben for taking us through that presentation, for giving us a wee bit of one-to-one, some time for Jimmy at Rotary and some time for Alan at the Chamber. So it ticks lots of boxes there, and so thank you very much for that, and for taking us through. I think you're right. The last 2 years have seen huge disruption and a huge need for change, but actually there are opportunities in that as well. And I really liked your idea, Shona, putting customer service maybe back at the forefront, and maybe how COVID is maybe refocusing us on some of the priorities there as well. So can I thank you both very much for your time today, for sharing your thoughts with us. And I do hope we have an opportunity to work with you again in the very near future, because I think there's quite a few topics that we can explore there as well. But can I thank everyone else for joining us today, for your questions and for your input as well, and for coming along. And I do hope that we get to see you at another Chamber webinar or face-to-face event soon. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care.